You guys, I have tried to film this video countless times. Tried to do it curling my hair, tried to do it flat ironing my hair, tried to do it crimping my hair just now, burnt my middle finger, burnt right there on my shoulder, did a bad job, had to go over my hair again, got distracted, forgot the notes that I wrote down. It's been a mess, suffice it to say. I believe that the devil does not want me to share this story with you. And there is a scripture that just poof ran out of my head. But the blood of the Lamb and the word of my testimony. And so that is what he does not want to share. He does not want to have me share my testimony. And that is what I'm doing right now here with you today. So my makeup's not on. You didn't get to chat with me while I did my hair. It's just you and me, and we're gonna go. What I wanted to talk to you guys about today is kind of vulnerable for me. It is a little bit about my husband and my finances, and then about, as I said, my testimony and the journey over the last few years. There are a lot of reasons and disclaimers and things that I could go into as to why our finances started off not great, but none of that matters. At the end of the day, I made poor decisions as a teenager that started me off in a lot of debt, and it just snowballs. The debt itself snowballs, and you get to the point where you can only pay the minimum payment, but the minimum payment isn't even fully paying the interest that's accruing each month, so your balance is increasing even though you're paying it every month, and all the things. We were relatively young when we got married. I was making terrible money / no money basically doing nails. He was making decent money for the stage in our life that we were in, but it just was not, we just didn't feel like we were getting anywhere ever. We were just getting further in debt, all the things. I then find a new career because I was doing nails when we first got together. And in that career, I actually fall in love with it, which, by the way, it was a total accident. I don't know if I've shared this on here before, but I really loved the cosmetology industry. I loved working in the salons. I love doing nails. I was really good at it and I just enjoyed it. I love to do pedicures, but I ended up having back surgery. And you're constantly hunched over doing pedicures, and pedicures is what I love to do. And so it was like 8 or 9 months after the back surgery when I was 23, y'all, 23, had major back surgery. And I went back to the specialist just to, as a checkup, make sure that everything's progressing well. And she's like, you're not healing like at all. And I was still in a lot of pain. I still couldn't stand for very long periods of time, like all the things. And she was like, the position that you have to be in is not enabling your body to heal post-surgery. So you either have to quit your job or you have to become, essentially you will become handicapped. And I was like, well, that doesn't really seem like an option. I'm only 23. So quit my job. I then got a new job, as literally just a filler. It was not like my new career. It was not what I wanted to be when I grew up, you know. I just needed a job to bring in money to pay the bills, while I then soul searched and decided what I wanted to be when I grew up. Well, as things happen, the Lord, in all of his wisdom and graciousness, allowed me to fall in love with that job that I was at. And then I just continued to climb the corporate ladder and do really well, which was a huge blessing and a miracle. So eventually we got to the point where my husband was actually able to quit his job and pursue something that he enjoyed versus something that he was literally killing his body at as well. He worked third shift and he was in management at Kroger, and it's just absolute backbreaking labor. And so I had, as I said, gone from making zero money doing nails to now making a decent income to where he could take the pay cut to start over somewhere else. The journey keeps progressing. I keep climbing up the corporate ladder. Full disclosure, I was taking full credit for this. I worked really hard. I put in the time. I was intelligent. I was making the right connections. I was working really hard. The working really hard did a lot. I was not having good work-life balance. It was a lot. So I took full credit for it. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And then, you know, the higher you get on the corporate ladder, it unfortunately starts to become a little dog eat dog, you know, so then you have to like even more each man for themselves, because now I have to show you why I deserve this, and I have to show you why I deserve the next one. And so it's me, you know, all of that comes out in the end. So one thing that was pretty humbling for me is I was secretly embarrassed because we're making more and more and more money, but we're not getting out of debt. We're in manageable debt, aka like we were able to pay it, but we were actually in a lot more debt if you looked at like the zoom out dollar figures. So for instance, we traded in my $9,000 car for like an actual car, you know what I'm saying? So now we're in double digit thousands instead of 9,000. And it was 9,000 when I bought it. So at the time where we traded in and I'd had it for a few years, we probably only had like 6 or 7,000 left on it. Which at the time seemed insurmountable. And so it's like, well, you might as well trade it in because you're always going to have a car payment. You might as well trade in your phone for the newest model on credit at Verizon because you're always going to have a phone payment anyway. Like those are the decisions that we were making. We never made any decisions to get out of debt. It was always, can we afford the minimum payment? Yes or no? Okay, well, since we can, might as well, because we're always going to be in this debt. And that was just the trajectory that we were on. So I had a director who I greatly respected. She was one of my mentors, and I got vulnerable with her at one point, and I was like, wow, this seems really overwhelming sometimes when we look at it. And she was like, girl, just because you keep getting promoted and stuff does not mean that you're paying off your debt. And now I'm going to mess it up. But she basically said, the more income you make, the more debt. Like statistically speaking, in America today, you would look at presidents and CEOs and all the things and be like, oh, they must have no debt. And they're probably drowning in debt. Like we had tens of thousands of debt and they probably had hundreds of thousands, whatever, in debt, because you're just in debt at a higher tax bracket. Because so many people are doing exactly what we were doing and continue, we got that new promotion, which means that we can afford a nicer car. Now we can afford to get cable and internet because we didn't have that when we first got married. Like you just keep adding so that your lifestyle is more comfortable in this newer bracket. And I really appreciated her being honest about that with me because it made me feel less alone, but also was like, wow, like this is actually a problem that not just I have, but like a lot of people have. And we kind of need like a whole new focus. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody needs to realize this so we all stop it. So we all snap out of it. Anyways, so we just keep it moving, keep getting promoted. We're now at the point where I by myself am making what we used to be making together at the beginning of our marriage. And yet, can I retire my husband? No, because as I already said, we're now in more debt, right? So a couple years ago, I start attending a new church. It's actually been, I guess this will be the 4th year. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the worship. I fell in love with the pastor, to be completely honest. That sounds wrong. I don't mean it that way. But it was in a very politically charged moment and in our history is what I will say. And the church that I grew up in and a lot of the churches that I was familiar with were ignoring it completely. Politics didn't exist. Racism didn't exist. Different colors didn't exist. I am just going to preach from the word and pretend that everything going on in America today is not going on. But one thing that I really liked about this pastor is that he wants his congregation to look like heaven. And that means different cultures, different colors, different economic statuses, different everything, because that is what heaven is going to look like. I'm going to get real crazy here. I don't know if y'all know this, but Jesus wasn't white, okay? That's just all I'm going to say about that. So I just was immediately, thank you, like refreshed. Like I finally found this pastor who's willing to tackle difficult subjects. And also he kind of has an attitude, not in a bad way, but in a very passionate is a better word than attitude. And so I just really enjoyed it. So I started getting involved in the church and this and that. And then I was like, you know what? I want to work here. This is my new thing. I picked nails. I fell into my next career, really enjoyed it for several years, but I want to do this. Like, this is something that I was picking. So I applied. Remember how I just said that I was taking credit for everything at my last job? Because I worked really hard and I did this and I did that and I did the other. I don't know if you caught this, but I left God out of all of it. God had blessed us over and over and over again. And I was like, I mean, you do you, boo, boo, boo. I'm the one doing this. So I surely did go into that interview cocky as all get out. It was a virtual interview, COVID, and I had on my little blazer and everything, and I'm just like, yes, hunty, corporate this, I'm doing this, da 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 da. Like, I don't remember actually saying this, but basically, your church would be lucky to have me because I run a multi-billion-dollar financial institution. And you're kind of just a church. So I'm so glad that you have so many people attending, like a couple thousand. But this is really going to be easy for me, and you're welcome. Now, sure, I didn't say any of that in the interview, but I'm also sure that that attitude came through because that is how I felt about myself at that time. Side note, I was also super like insecure at the same time. Like, my personality was almost split down the middle. My professional self was like a bulldog, and then my actual self was like, where do I belong in the world? You know what I'm saying? But because this was an interview, my professional self was taking over. So never heard back. Never, ever, never, ever, ever, never heard back. Finally, I get really annoyed. And so I just surely do go up to the person that did my phone interview on a Sunday. I just pulled her to the side and I was like, bro, did I get the job or not? And she's like, no, we went another direction. And I was like, fine, but you could have at least said that. So I'm sure I was not very nice then either. That's kind of a lie. I don't think I said anything. I was like, okay, great. But then internally I was like, oh, how dare you? You ghosted me. You didn't say anything, da 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 da. Now, what I have since learned is that at this particular church, the interview process takes a very long time because they have like lots and lots of steps. And I don't think I let them finish their process because to me, it was just so obvious that I should have been selected. So I'm pretty sure I pulled her out of church, not when the process was done, but she was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and cut my losses and tell you that we're going to go a different direction, which sucked. But in hindsight, was the right choice. So this is the thing. I really wanted that job. It doesn't sound like it because it sounds like I was not a very nice person at that time. But I really did want that. And I was a little bit devastated. And at the same time that I didn't get that, I had gone for promotion at my corporate job. And up until then, a couple years ago, every time in my entire multiple year career, I think I'd been there for like 7 years at this point, that I had gone for promotion, I had gotten it. I had never been turned down. So I didn't get the church job that I wanted, and I got turned down in corporate for the first time. I bawled. I was just like, you know what? It's not even that I was unhappy where I was necessarily, but I was like, I don't want to work here anymore. I don't want to work at this specific location. I'm fine being with a company, but I just need something fresh because this obviously isn't working for me. So I then take a different position, still a promotion, but just not the same one that I had been going for. Fell in love with it. So I was like, you know, it all works out in the end. Made some really, really great friends in that role that I still have with me today. And honestly, yes, I really enjoyed that position. Got to reconnect with a previous director, not the one who talked about debt being at a different tax bracket, but one of my other, I had two really strong mentors in my career there. And it was the first one, actually, that I got to reconnect with. And she got to be my director again in this new role. And then I got to be with her as she retired and help celebrate her and all the things. And it was just a great opportunity. I just really enjoyed it. So in my mind, I'm the type of person that I need what's the term? Instant gratification. I need instant gratification. So I'm like, this is the gratification. This is why I'm here. I got to reconnect with her. I got to meet new people. Da, 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 da. Clearly, this is what God had for me. I'm putting him in a box. And this is why he didn't give me these other two positions. It has to make sense and it has to fit in this little box because that's how it makes sense in my mind. Cool. At about the same time, actually at the exact same time, when I got this new role, my husband and I decided to really work on getting out of debt. He had been the breadwinner for a long time and then transitioned into where I was the breadwinner, but still collectively we were like, the amount of debt that we are in is unhealthy and shouldn't be sustainable. And he just had this constant weight on his chest all the time. And then now that I was a breadwinner, I was starting to have the constant weight on my chest. And we were just like, let's just get out of this. So one of my best friend's moms is really great at budgets and stuff. And so I reached out to my friend and I was like, hey, this is kind of embarrassing, but can you tell your mom that I want to talk to her because I need her to help me with the budget? And she was like, absolutely, yes. So then her mom texts me and she's like, listen, I need this, this, and this information. And it's embarrassing. I'm telling you how much we're spending on food, which is too much, by the way. I'm telling you all of our bills. I'm telling you all of our debt, all of our credit cards, how much we make, the difference in what we make in our bills. And it's just like embarrassing. And I've never even met this person before. I just know that she's good at this. So eventually I meet her. Shortly after that, I send her all of the information. And then she's like, all right, now that I've had some time to work on it, let's go ahead and meet. And so then I meet and she just pours into me. Just life and the love of Jesus and the wisdom that I absolutely believe that he has given her throughout the years when it comes to finances and doing it in a Christian way. Just literal life-giving. So here's the thing. I then have to go home and tell my husband, hey, babe, I really want us to change how we do our finances. And he's on board because he wants to get out of debt too. Like, he actually wants to get out of debt more than I do. But we're going to do some crazy stuff because of this crazy stuff that this crazy lady just told me. She's not crazy, but he doesn't know that. And you've never met her, and you kind of just have to trust me. There's no way on earth that this is going to work. And he was like, YOLO. Like, can it get any worse than it is? And so that was like God thing number one. Not actually number one, but number one that I recognized was God going before me and just even putting Kylie in my life and then Beth in my life and then Chris's receptiveness to like trying something totally crazy to get out of debt. And this happened in December of that year. So we literally both just got bonuses from our job and we had plans with what to do for those bonuses. And she was like, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to do this thing over here. And it seemed counterintuitive because we wanted to take those bonuses and pay off a couple of our credit cards. And she was like, no, that's not the wisest thing to do here. And so that piece was a little bit like, are you sure? Because getting out of those little debts seems like a good idea. But we didn't do it. We had faith and we trusted her. And I put a lot of this on her. But we were praying heavily throughout this. She was too. She had us write it all down in a notebook. She's like, you're going to look back at this someday and this is going to be your testimony, like all the things. But we knew that we had basically lost our privileges. And so we were like, we can't make financial decisions by ourselves because we've lost our privileges. So anytime something came up, we would reach out and be like, hey, how would you handle this? And she told me, she was like, be aware that because you're trying to do this now, the devil's going to come after you and he's not going to want you to get out of this debt. I think it was the literal week that I met her, I ended up taking the mirror off my car and it was $700 to get it fixed. And I was just like, and it begins. And it was like that. It would be step forward, step back, step forward, step back. But we just, as I said, we had faith and we just kept it moving. So then COVID happens and we are both blessed to where we still maintained our jobs during that time. And stimulus checks happened. We used that to chunk on things. You know, it's all working out for us to where when the overall global economy is not doing well, we're actually getting a little bit forward and a little bit forward and a little bit forward. And we did not take that for granted. We were so grateful and blessed as that was happening. I have to sneeze, you guys. Anyway, so all of that to say, we're just going. We make some interesting decisions even in that couple of years, but we still stand behind them because we felt that the Lord was telling us to do a couple things that may seem stupid to the world, but that he was telling us to do. And so we followed them, as confusing as they were. And with those, I will say that I was willing to give up the instant gratification. I may not see why these are wise decisions, but both my husband and I agree that this is what he's asking us to do. So we're just going to go ahead and do it. Cool. So I then get COVID. I had managed to avoid it for like 2 years at that point. But she got me and she got me good. So I ended up in the hospital. I ended up missing a month of work around about, I want to say it was an exact month, but it could have been, you know, a little bit, a couple days more or less, whatever. And I got paid that whole time because I had really good benefits from the corporate job that I was at. And cool. People were concerned, obviously, when I was in the hospital that I wasn't going to make it. I always felt like I would, but also I was out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like that first couple days, definitely the first day in the hospital, I was like, I don't even care, to be honest. Like I did not have enough in me to care what would happen. I just didn't believe that I was dying. And then I didn't, obviously. Thank you, Jesus. Fun fact, I think I might have told you guys this before. My husband like terrified the hospital staff because they wouldn't let him stay because COVID. But he was like, you're telling me that there's a chance that she'll die overnight and I'm never going to see my wife again. And so I'm not going to leave. I will sit here with her. I've been in the house with her for the last like 10 days. If I was going to get COVID, I would get it. And they were just like, we don't care. Go home. And it was a whole thing. But to the point where they literally put an alarm on my bed so that if my foot, like if the sensor changed or whatever, if my foot got out of bed, they would come running in and be like, what are you doing? Because they were like, your husband's going to kill us all if something happens to you. So it's kind of not funny, but it was. Anyways, so then I get back to work. That was a challenge, you guys. Oh my gosh, the brain fog was real. As I said, my boss was retiring in and around this time. And I had a card for her that was at my desk, and it had just stayed at my desk for that month because obviously I wasn't there. So when I came back, I gave it to her belated, and I hadn't signed it before. I had purchased it and I had put it in my desk. And I sat there with a pen in my hand and I was looking at it. I couldn't quite remember how to write. Like I had been typing up till this point. Upon my return, I'd been typing in my laptop, To handwrite the card to her was just like the weirdest, would not come from my brain out of my fingers type situation. And that's when I was like, okay, COVID brain is real and it's shenanigans. There was also an instance in that same week, because it was the first week that I came back to work. What did I have to do? It was something like relatively mundane. Like maybe I needed to like take a, no, it was even less than that. I had been given a Christmas present because that's the time frame that this was. I couldn't get the wrapping paper off. You guys, wrapping paper. That's like super thin. That rips really easily. I did not have the energy to get it off. That is how completely depleted I was. And she laughed at me because she didn't realize that it was serious. And then she was like, oh, and then she grabbed it from me and she helped me. But like, who would believe that you can't rip wrapping paper? You know what I'm saying? Like it was insane. And there's a reason I'm telling you guys all this. This has already gone on way longer than I intended. So if you're still here, thanks. Then time continues. And here we are relatively recently. And I hate to say God told me because I think that gets really convoluted sometimes, but God had been making it very clear to me that I needed to leave my job. But like, that's one of those things that doesn't make any earthly sense because I'm making decent money. I am the breadwinner. I make a decent amount more than my husband. I have a reputation. I have made a name for myself. All of the I things that we'd already been talking about. I'm really good at my job. They need me. My team needs me. How will they ever get by without me? You know, all the things. And even if I'm not in my current role, there is different roles in the organization that different people have been coming to me. They're like, hey, by the way, this is about to open in the next 6 months. Hey, by the way, so-and-so is retiring. Hey, by the way, like I was being unofficially groomed for different big promotional things. And those were the goal. Like when I realized that I loved this industry all the way back 9 years ago, that was what I wanted to hit. I wanted to hit a certain pay grade and I wanted to hit a certain title. And I'm now being groomed for that on the sly. And that's when God tells me to quit. And I'm like, this is a joke. So guess who didn't quit? Me. So I don't. And I just keep doing my job. And I've just become increasingly more and more and more unhappy and just miserable. And this is actually a key part of what I want to talk to you guys about. With people that did not think that you could grow apart from each other. You and I can't be friends, and then a few years down the road, just kind of like lose touch and not be friends anymore. Something had to happen. There had to be a big blow up. There has to be a reason that we hate each other now. Like there has to be a reason that we don't like each other. I am a firm believer that you can just grow apart, that you can outgrow a position, that you can outgrow whatever. But in this case, because it just didn't make sense, I was like, there has to be, I'm not just going to leave. Like, there has to be a reason for this. I just kept getting increasingly unhappy. And I am also the type of person that, yes, we have to pay our bills, but I have to be happy with what I'm doing. Like, there are people that, like, I don't love my job, but I don't hate it, so I'm totally fine to do this for the rest of my life. Absolutely not. Like, my soul will die. Like, I have to enjoy what I'm doing, otherwise I can't do it. I'm just miserable. And for no particular reason, I just didn't enjoy what I was doing anymore. And I was just getting so stressed about stupid things. And like, yes, there are people that I could blame, and there were situations that I'm like, that's still unfair. And I can still say that. The really key ticket for me was the fact that I officially completed a perfect year. It's very hard to do. I hit every metric. I hit every goal. I didn't just hit them, I exceeded them. And as a team, my team exceeded every single goal that was set before us the year before, which had never been done before in company history. And I didn't care. I was just miserable. I was like, and what? That didn't do anything for me. So I'm just being super successful, and it's just not fulfilling. It's not satisfying. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just not finding my satisfaction and fulfillment out of it. And then now I'm being groomed for the title and pay grade that I've been literally dreaming about for the last 9 years. And I'm like, and then what? Now I'm going to have that more stress added to me, and like, I'm just miserable. And then it was around Easter. I don't think it was Easter Sunday. It might have been the Sunday right before or after, but it was within that couple week span. I'm in church by myself, and we're going through worship, and I don't even think he'd started preaching yet. And God just told me so clearly to quit my job. And I was like, you know what? At this point, I'm mildly willing to, because I'm miserable for no particular reason. But you haven't provided me another job to take. So basically, me not quitting is your fault. If you would give me something else to where I can quit, then I would. And he just so clearly said to me, he was like, did I tell you that I would? Or did I tell you to quit your job? And I was like, oh, like I was literally standing there surrounded by people, but all by myself. I went by myself that morning. It was like, oh no, that's it. I am so miserable because I'm actively outside the will of God, because he's been telling me this thing for months and I've not been doing it because I've been waiting for him to do it in a way that I want him to, not the way that he told me to. So now I'm having like a full-blown panic attack because I'm like, sir, I cannot go home and tell my husband that I am quitting my job when I am the breadwinner, and then I don't have another job, and then I don't even have a plan for another job, because you just told me that that's not your plan. The plan is just for me to quit. Stress. So the whole way home I'm praying. I was like, Lord, you need to do this. Like, I now understand, and I am now willing, but you have to talk to my husband. I can't talk to him. I can't go up in there and just be like, hey babe, this is what we're going to do. You have to talk to him. You have to get him comfortable with this. So I get home and I'm like, can we talk? And he's like, yes, what? And I have this whole thing, and I just tell him all about it. And he was like, wow. Okay. And I was like, excuse me, what? Did you just say okay? This is a joke. This is a joke. I guess I'm quitting my job. Like, I literally cannot express to you guys the emotions going on in this trajectory and period of time, because it just does not make sense. And whatever. So we then have Sunday night church, and which at the time we were having monthly. We're not having it for the summer. And I drove my friend because it was a distance from both of us. So I picked her up and I went, and I'm just telling her all about this the whole drive. And I'm like, what do I do? And like, oh my gosh, and da 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 da. And she was like, I'm pretty sure you have your answer, and I'm not actually sure why we're really talking about this. She was way nicer than that. So by the time I got home, I drafted up my resignation email and I sent it. And I quit the job that I was super successful at, making a lot of money at, and that I hadn't realized at the time, but that had grown to become my identity for the last 9 years. I surely did. So then I'm on Instagram, because what are you going to do but be on Instagram? and I see that the church that I applied, that I'm attending currently, and that I applied 4 years ago now has positions open again. So I apply. And it's this whole big long process, but at the end of the day, I get the job. So stoked. And then when I tell you it was a long process, I mean it was a long process. And I actually really appreciate that process. And it was just so, they do it with such intentionality and such wisdom. And one of the senior pastors was in my final interview, and she literally had a conversation with me that if you can do anything in your life other than ministry and be happy, satisfied, and fulfilled, then that is what you should do. Ministry is not for the faint of heart. We don't just come together and pray and sing Kumbaya. The devil does not like when you devote your life to Christ, and he definitely doesn't like when you devote your entire life into his ministry. So there will be spiritual warfare. There will be this and that. If you can do anything else and be fulfilled, then that thing is what God made you to do. And I could look at her straight in her face and be like, you know what? I can't, because I have tried and I was super successful by the world standards, and I just felt empty and nothing, because secretly this whole time there was something else that I was supposed to be doing, and it was this. And I just really feel like I'm even now stepping into my purpose and haven't even fully realized it yet. So all of that to say, I get the job. And then I'm talking back and forth with one of the other pastors, because he's the one doing like the HR type stuff and the salary. And he's like, I will not be able to come anywhere close to what you're making now. And I was like, I understand that. That was a decision that Chris and I had made. And so he then emailed me once he had all of his ducks in a row and was able to give me the salary. And before, we waited like 2 or 3 days for that. So Chris and I had, a decision. We had made a range. I did our budget a few different ways, and I was like, we can make it from here all the way to here. Obviously, here's what we would prefer, but this is like the lowest that we can do. The offer came in $1,000 lower than the lowest that we could do. So I'm like, this might be it. This might be the sign that this isn't for me, because what I don't want to do, having already been in disobedience to God, is to continue. So if this is not what he has for me, and if it's something else, then let's find that out now. And so I talked to my husband about it, and I'm like, what do we think? And he's just like, go for it. We will find a way to shave off $1,000 over the course of 12 months. And I was like, when I tell you guys that every single time I talked to him, it was just like, those conversations in and of themselves were a miracle, because it's so not what he would normally say. I'm just like, what is happening? Like, I was almost ready for him to like put the kibosh on it, because at least that way it's not my decision. You know what I'm saying? So then if it's a bad decision, it's not my decision. But he's like, go for it. And I'm like, all right. So I do. But here's the deal. That is when the start of the zooming out and us both realizing God has had me on a very specific journey this entire time. Because remember how I told you that just randomly 2-3 years ago, we were like, hey, we should probably get out of debt. This seems a little bit ridiculous. This is not a brag. This is not a humble brag. I have nothing to do with this. My husband has nothing to do with this. And we both truly give all the glory to God. In that 2-year span, we paid off $158,000 in debt. Had we not done that, when I was offered this dream position in ministry and this place that I just absolutely share the heart of, I would have had to say no. I would have had to say, I truly can't afford that. We will literally not be able to feed ourselves and pay our bills. But randomly, 2-ish years ago, God put on both of our hearts to get out of debt, and then he helped us do it. Because listen, in a month, less than a month, my husband and I will have been married for 12 years and together for 15. We had tried all the different ways, okay? We were not going to get out of debt ourselves. I already told you, we lost our privileges. And in just 2 years, look at God. And I mean that very sincerely. And so as I said, I just zoomed out and I just start seeing he laid that on our hearts. He put us in contact with just great life-giving and just wisdom-giving friends. He then provided the way for us to get out of debt. And then he provided the job at the right time. And he provided the ability for us to pay our bills. And then once I started recognizing that, I went back even further. And I won't go further with y'all because we just don't have time. But when I tell you that I can clearly look back, my entire life has actually led up to this moment. And I am not saying that dramatically. To the point of the schools that I went to, and then how I met my husband, and then this and that and the other. Just all of these pieces that we're finding out from the past are just completely intertwined. And it just gives me so much confidence and faith because this is new. This is very new for me. And my career is new, and the ministry is new. And I'm now recognizing that I relied entirely on myself and that I should never have done that, and had a big piece of humble pie in this whole process. And I just every day am having to learn to die to self, and rely on God and his wisdom. And it's just been very humbling. Some days it's really hard, but overall it is just so beautiful. And we just feel so blessed that we just get to look back and clearly, like, was it instant gratification to how I would have wanted it years ago? No, not at all. But in this moment, literally the mind is blown. And I feel like we're literally just at the beginning. Like, we actually have a little bit more debt to pay off. I'm ashamed to say, but we do. And we're going to get there. And it's stressful because now I'm making so much less, obviously. And it's like, oh, what are we going to do? So actually, that's another piece of it. I started panicking. I was like, well, now I'm making less. What if that was a bad decision? What are we going to do? What if we can't get out of this last little bit of debt? And then because we can't get out of this debt, then what if something else happens and we can't pay off that? And da 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 da. Well, in all of this time, over the course of 2 years that we've been paying off this debt and everything, we snowballed it in a good way. We took this much, and then because we paid that off, we took that and this minimum payment, and then because we paid that off, then we took that, and we just snowballed it in the way that you're supposed to. But we never went back and looked at the total. So it was literally just this last week that for the first time, I tallied up all of the debts that we paid off and realized how much it was. And then I just had to sit at that and go, literally, thank you, Jesus. But also, if you could do that, what is wrong with me that I'm already starting to doubt that you can take us this last little bit? It's a joke. So I don't know. I just hope this is an encouragement to somebody because I tend to be a person that feels like I get past things. So because I got past this bad spending lifestyle, and because I got past this debt and past this and that and the other, I am redeemed and I'm not going to do it anymore. And once again, I did it. I start gratifying self, and it just really, you have nothing to do with it the whole time. You're just a vessel. And I mean that in the best way possible. But as that came out, I realized that it kind of sounded weird. But it's just literally all glory to God. And when he showed me on paper how far he took us, it just re-blessed my life. It re-blessed my soul and re-encouraged me. Philippians 4:15, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I think that's where I'm going to leave you guys today because we've already been on here for a good 39 minutes. And I just feel so strongly about this that I could keep going forever. So I hope this has encouraged somebody today. You absolutely can do it because you're not doing it on your own strength. You're not doing it by yourself. It is the Lord who does it through you. Have a great day.